To present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, and wall sections. Staff will then present the staff report. We will then ask for any public comment. Following the presentation, the commissioners will be asking questions in the same order as the presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly if you are here to speak for or against a project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes go by very quickly. Following public comment, the applicant will be allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based upon the City Ordinance Chapter 27 of the City Zoning Code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of the Interior standards, Historic Preservation Development Review comments, the HPDRC, and the testimony given at this public hearing. The ARC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner and agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and/or approvals. And if you haven't done so already, please silence all cell phones. At this point, I'll ask my fellow commissioners, starting on my right, to introduce themselves.
Dan Myers, architect.
Susan Klaus-Smith, architect and vice chair.
Brent Taylor, building contractor.
Stephen Sutton, architect. I also hold the architectural historian chair.
Shauna Boyd, interior designer.
We're also joined here tonight by city staff, Ron Vila, Beverly Juisak, and Kamaria Pettis-Mackel with the city's attorney's office.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Will the commissioners please state on the record whether or not they've had any ex parte communications regarding any of the items that are listed on the agenda?
I have none.
No.
None.
Thank you. Additionally, will the commissioners please state on the record whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items on the agenda?
None.
None.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kamario. Ron Vila, staff for Historic Preservation. Moving down our agenda item, addressing continuations. We have two separate motions that will be needed this evening. For the first case is ARC 21-364 for the address of 818 South Edison Avenue. This was requested by the agent to continue to November 1st, 2021, public hearing at 6 p.m. And if we could get a motion for that, please.
I'd like to make a motion for continuation, or move to grant a continuation in case ARC 21-364 for the property located at 818 South Edison Avenue to the November 1st, 2021 public hearing at 6 p.m.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
And the next two continuations can be lumped together because they're going to the same hearing date in the future. The first case is ARC 21-442/REZ 21-86. This is for the address of 1701 North Florida Avenue, 202 East 7th Avenue, 1802 to 1808 North Morgan Street, and 208 East Oak Avenue. This was also requested by the agent to continue to the October 6, 2021 hearing at 6 p.m. Attached to that request is a vacating, which is ARC 21-450/VAC 2109. This is for the address of 1701 North Florida Avenue, requested by the agent to continue to the October 6, 2021 hearing at 6 p.m. And if we could get one motion for both of those continuations.
Move to grant a continuance in case ARC 21-442/Z 21-86 for the properties located at 1701 North Florida Avenue, 202 East 7th Avenue, 1802 to 1808 North Morgan Street, and 209 East Oak Avenue, as well as ARC 21-450/VAC 21-09 for the property located at 1701 North Florida Avenue to the October 6, 2021 public hearing at 6 p.m.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you for those motions. At this time, we're going to do the swear-in. Ms. Beverly Juzak with the Historic Preservation Department will swear us in. Everybody that wishes to testify, please stand up and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. We're ready for the first case this evening, which is ARC 21-404. This is for the address of 1505 Bayshore Boulevard. This is in the Heights Park Historic District. There is a non-contributing structure. It was constructed in 2004. The primary structure and the detached accessory structure are both non-contributing and were reviewed and approved in 2000. That is illustrated on your staff report under previous actions on page 2. This evening, they're asking for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition of approximately 480 square feet. At this time, I'd like to go through the photo presentation. On your monitor, you have the Sanborn map from 1929. Property that we'll be reviewing this evening is highlighted in this green box. In 1929, it was a vacant parcel, and I believe it was vacant all the way to 2000 when the ARC approved what's currently there, and the photos will illustrate what's there now. The property does face Bayshore Boulevard. To the west, you have Dakota, and to the north, you have Watrous. There is a very challenging alley that runs behind the property. It hugs the rear of the property, and then it heads to the north. This is our vicinity map. I like to include this at times to show you the proximity of where the structure is and the site is compared to the overall boundary district lines. The local district is indicated with the red highlighted border around Hyde Park. So this is in the southern portion, and it does face Bayshore. This is looking from above. You see Bayshore Boulevard as a reference point. You have Dakota to the west. The alley that I spoke about is still open. That was indicated on the Sanborn map and then on this vicinity map here as well. And you have Oregon to the east as a reference point as well. This is the masonry vernacular structure that was approved. This is the front elevation that faces Bayshore Boulevard. As you go around to the eastern portion, the front facade is over here. This is looking at the east. You see the compatibility of the two structures and the difference of the materials. This is what was reviewed by the ARC and approved, and what was built. So I thought I'd share that with you. Looking at the property to the east, you have this period structure, and then as you continue to the east, you have these two contributing structures. What we're going to be looking at is over here, there's an infill this evening between the primary structure, the brick building, and the detached accessory structure. This is looking at the western facade from the back, from the alley, looking back at the facade. The abutting structure on that side is a contributing structure. This is the view out of their driveway, looking at Bayshore. This is from the alley. This is looking at the detached accessory structure. You see the detached accessory structure and then the primary structure behind it. You have this void in between the structures that is going to encompass the request this evening. This is just a little closer shot of what's there. There are no windows in discussion this evening as they bring in the roof line. And then looking at the decking that's there, this is the area that they want to enclose as well, and looking at the abutting property. And to conclude, this is just another shot of the area between the primary structure, the detached accessory structure. This is the area that they wish to encompass to do some private outdoor space. That concludes the photo presentation, and I'll have the agent address the board.
Good evening, Jamie Mayer of the law firm Hillward Henderson for the applicant. My address is 101 East Kennedy Boulevard, Suite 3700, Tampa. I have a PowerPoint. I guess I can switch it over.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you, Ron, for that presentation, and I'll cut out the duplicative photos that I have because they're basically the same ones. So this is, as described by staff, we're asking for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction and site improvements to the principal structure and rear addition, so bringing them together. Connecting those two structures with a roofed enclosure that's going to have screen on those two sides that you saw that are open. So just, again, you've seen these photos, but this is just to orient you to what we're talking about on the site in relation to the full site plan that I'll show you in a minute. So as you can see on the left, you have the side of the property. If you were looking kind of from Bayshore from an angle, you've got that open deck space there. And then on the rear of the property, if you were facing the garage from the alley, you've got that open portion there. So the patio is kind of nestled in between those two, open on two sides. And again, photos that you saw of the space we're talking about. So here, what you saw was the existing conditions. The proposal here is to add this wooden frame enclosure with a roof to the two sides that are open, and then the roof, of course, is going to cover the entirety of the deck space, connecting the structures. This is the survey, and with the outline of the proposed roof kind of drawn in over it, and then a close-up of the kind of an aerial view of what is proposed. You'll notice that that aerial view is actually oriented or shown in the opposite direction, but it's the same roof. It's just shown as if you were looking towards Bayshore. And here's the full before and after elevations of both the sides that are going to have the enclosure. The wall sections that were provided, and if there are any more technical questions, we have our builder and architects are present. So of course, as you all are very familiar, the code standard of review for new construction requires that certain criteria be considered, and the design must be in keeping with the Hyde Park design guidelines. As you saw from the elevations, the scale and height of the addition is designed to delineate between the two existing structures, and it's a gabled roof rather than flat, which is both in keeping with the existing structures and also with the Hyde Park design guidelines. And it is of height, it's not to overpower or alter the existing roof line, but rather to be subordinate to and complement it. The mass, we're filling in a space that already exists. We are using an existing footprint, and it's in a form reminiscent of the existing structures on the site. The setbacks were consistent with the site's existing setbacks. Orientation is also, of course, consistent because we're building on a footprint that already exists, and we're not changing anything with respect to orientation or rhythm or spacing or alignment. The materials that we are going to, I'll show you some samples specifically of the materials, but they are materials that are common to the district as well as complementary to and compatible with the existing structures. We're not adding entrances or projections. There's going to be a wood screen door on the back, as you saw in the elevations, but we're not changing the actual entrance of the structure, nor are we adding any porch projections. And as I said, the roof form is gabled, and it's going to be shingle to match the house. And the paint is going to be colors of the existing trim. So this is a picture of the shingles of the actual house. The shingles are going to match that. And then the deck material that you saw is going to remain. So the deck material is going to be the same. These are sample photos from the builder. It's going to be painted wood frame and wood post enclosure with the wire mesh clear view screen and the painted wood screen door with a single panel in an appropriate style for the district. And then there's going to be a tongue and groove ceiling, as you can kind of see from that photo what the ceiling would look like. And I'll show you a few more pictures. Actually, we have, and I apologize if I could use the Elmo to show you these photos of the hardware for the door and a proposed, well, thank you. Okay, awesome. Testing. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Can't hear myself. This is a light fixture that's on the house. So the light fixtures used in connection with this enclosure is going to be of a style very similar to that.
And then this is the hardware selected for the wood screen door.
And again, obviously, this has been designed, as I mentioned, in connection with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines. I just want to highlight a few of the guidelines that I think are most significant to this project. Of course, in the guidelines, most roofs are gabled or hipped. We're doing a gabled roof in keeping with the existing structure, and it's going to be shingle. We're maintaining the existing foundation, which in the rear is slab on grade, and on the side is a retaining wall. And then we're doing, the wooden screen door and wooden screen enclosure rather than aluminum, which is prohibited in the district. The height of this new roof and enclosure is going to be subordinate to the primary structure and to the rear structure that exist. The rhythm of this building is going to be in alignment with the existing buildings, and the way it's going to be designed is to ensure transition between compatible materials with maintaining the stylistic emphasis of the primary structure. I would like to just briefly call up our architect to just make a statement on the compatibility with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines.
Good evening, Bert Thomas, architect, Brandon, Florida. Thank you for your time this evening, and according to my experience, which I've worked with the ARC over the years many times, and many projects in Hyde Park, I believe that this design is in keeping with the guidelines for the Hyde Park district, and also complements both this building and the entire district. So I think it complies. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, wanted to keep it brief for everybody's time tonight, but we respectfully request approval, and we're all here to answer any questions, show any photos again that you might like to see, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, staff will present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioner. Ron Veal, I'm staff with Historic Preservation. The request in front of you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness. It's for new construction and addition. This is going to be infill between the primary structure and the detached accessory structure. There are no variances attached to this request. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines. On page 3 of the staff report, there were some conditions attached, and the conditions were addressed through the presentation. I will be here to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this point, we will open the public hearing to any public comment. If anyone would like to speak for or against. All right, seeing and hearing none. We'll move to the commissioners asking questions. Would a commissioner like to begin with any questions?
May I see the I guess it's the side elevation against the adjoining property?
These?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's been no attempt to reference either the primary structure in terms of the location of the supports for the screen wall, for the screens?
I think that would be a question for our architects to answer.
There's been no attempt to reference the what, sir?
The openings on the primary structure, their rhythm, their spacing. I mean, it's a pretty straight. What you've done is a pretty straightforward.
Yes,
this is,
and that was intended so that it wouldn't, so the lightness between the two structures. We didn't want to clutter it up with more structure. We wanted to emphasize that it is a separation between the two structures, but the placing of the vertical supports is in proportion, I feel, to the rest of the east elevation, including on the primary structure. And so, we could have done it, as you know, many different ways, but I felt like this was more compatible and sympathetic to the existing primary house.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If you could keep those up, sir, if you don't mind. There's a notation on that elevation that says painted wood pointing to the lower portion, but it looks like the screening hatch is still indicated there. So what is the material at that lower?
What you don't see, ma'am, is a horizontal piece of framework that would be painted in between the two, the upper and the lower screen panel. Are you talking about on the rear elevation there?
No, the elevation facing
Oh,
the
okay.
adjoining property, you
yeah.
have the note painted wood, but it looks like screen material where it's pointing
Yeah,
to.
no, you're absolutely right. That's not going to be wood there. It's going to be screen material. That's the case of an errant
Okay.
Sharpie.
Well, I wanted to make sure because you had just stated,
No.
having more of that transparency.
That's very
Okay.
fair, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's it for right now for me.
I have no question.
I have none.
I have a quick question for staff. In the previous action, was the accessory structure included in the 2000 approval?
Both structures came forward in 2000, and as they exist today is what was presented and approved.
Okay. Is the accessory structure also painted wood?
Yes, ma'am. It's lap siding, I believe, which is painted.
And your intention is to just match the material?
Well, in terms of the frame for this structure in between is going to be wood, as the siding on the accessory structure is. Yes, ma'am. But that siding, this is more of a framing member, but it'll be painted to match the same.
I don't have any additional questions.
I'm sorry, it's going to be painted to match the color of the trim on the windows, not the body of the accessory structure. Is that correct? Like, is it chocolate brown or is it white or
I think they're
light in color?
They're light, yes, sir. So this would be a light color.
Oh, okay.
Yes, the house is darker, but I think once we get away from the primary house, then we need to reflect more of, it's an outdoor type structure instead of part of the primary house.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question in terms of the foundation, and maybe we can first talk about the images on the left. So
Yes,
the
sir.
wood decking that's on between the house and the accessory structure, is that on grade or is that lifted?
Correct. It is lifted over top of a slab that was there, and
Okay.
that's in place, and that is planned to be remain in place.
Okay. So then
It's-
on the, I guess what would be kind of the left elevation that we're looking at on the left side of the screen, what's below that wood decking, which, we talked about the foundation not changing at all. What would need to be done to that side to support any of the columns or any of those dividing elements along that side if that area is open?
Yeah. Mr. Greco, that is a retaining wall,
Okay.
and it currently contains the fill that's supporting the slab on which the deck is placed. And so it is also, which does not show here, but it's at least 12 inches thick, has a brick coping on top, so we will anchor the bottom plates to that. We'll lag bolt it into that, and it'll remain back from the edge of the retaining wall, so we want to express that nice brick trim that's there now. So essentially, that doesn't change at all.
Okay.
But now with the addition of this infill project, we're able to capture the water and direct it subgrade a lot better than it is now, which it just kind of falls off the retaining wall.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to again on the left side, where that screen enclosure stops to where instead of having it come sort of flushed with the primary structure and the accessory structure, that it was pulled in to kind of give it a little bit more separation instead of truly just a single facade?
Good point. If you look at the sections, how do you do that? I don't know how you do that. At any rate, it does show it sitting back whereas on the floor plan, it's not shown correctly.
Could you, I'm sorry, could you put that section up?
Oh, okay.
Just so we can see it? Thank you, sir.
So,
So if we're looking at the
I'd
section,
like to move it back about another 8 inches to really express that corner there. I think it would be a better solution,
okay.
so I appreciate the suggestion.
So right now, how much of a setback is there from what's the
About
screening?
4 inches.
Okay. So if you did that, the full 8 inches, knowing that the idea is to sit on top of that retaining wall, do you have to go back and adjust that foundation at all?
No, sir, because it's behind that is a slab.
Okay.
So we would be sitting on top of that.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I have a question for staff. Understanding that this is a screened porch and that there are existing foundations, we've had discussions in the past about setting precedents, and if this is allowed, does it then become a given that if this became enclosed with glazing, that it would be more or less allowed? I know that they potentially would have to come before the board, but because essentially what is happening, the infill is creating the potential for the garage no longer being a detached accessory structure, which goes against the guidelines.
In this particular situation, is site-specific. Usually, when you attach the two structures, then the accessory structure has to meet primary structure setbacks as well. In this particular situation, after reviewing with the zoning department, there were no variances that were needed because of the layout of the parcel. So in the future, if somebody were to connect these two structures, I think that it would kick into a variance situation, and then you would look at the hardship for the variance to see if it's unique and singular and if it met that criteria. In this particular situation, no variance is requested.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on a similar vein. I have none now, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right, at this point, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
I'm not sure if we need that time, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will close this portion of the public hearing. The commissioners can now discuss the case. Would a commissioner like to begin with anything? Or is there anything to discuss?
I have no point of discussion, thank you.
I have no point of discussion.
I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that they're, through the material choices, they're being sensitive to the district and to the current structures on site. And I understand the need to have some enclosed outdoor space, especially along Bay Shore where you have the water. I'm just a little concerned about, I just find it very foreign to the way it's being done, and even pulling it back, it just doesn't feel comfortable in terms of what we've seen before and what we've seen from a historical precedent standpoint.
Is it the roof line?
Excuse me, commissioners, can you speak a little bit louder and make sure that your microphone is on? Because that Commissioner Sutton, I didn't hear what you just said.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, because it's filling up the site. There's a certain degree of clutter already with a large main dwelling and a large accessory structure, and now we're doing an infill between the two of them. If you're really filling up that side yard, I can understand the claustrophobia of the presentation.
Well, it definitely has to do more with the sensibility of form and massing, which are two of our mandates under the guidelines and the Secretary's standards as well. And even though it's screened, it still has presence. It has a physical presence that you would know, whether you're walking along Bay Shore or you're that neighbor next door. So it isn't consistent, in my view, with what we would typically see from, alignment with the district's standards.
Understood your point.
Commissioner Boyd?
I don't disagree. We also typically see screen porches or porches sitting in the front of these historic homes or homes in the historic district. It does feel foreign.
I almost feel like if they could work on pulling it further back from that elevation so that it really lends itself to being more in that detached realm rather than a continuation of the other.
Like even when we looked at the site plan, it looked like we were looking at the existing structure and just like sort of blocked in between. Like there was very little separation between now what is now sort of three roof structures. And we also don't typically see like the detached garage becoming sort of a plan view form of the house.
So I think the only thing, and I completely agree with both the comments. For me, I think we'll have to kind of see this as most people will not experience this house from a plan view. So even though there is that kind of large volume, you don't typically see that or you won't experience it. I do think that if we can pull back, and the applicant did seem applicable to the idea of pulling in and kind of setting that back in, to where from most of the interaction as you kind of come around, it does still seem that there's the primary structure and then the accessory structure. For me, I think that would help alleviate it. Now, is 8 inches, additional 8 inches enough? I don't know. To me, I'd almost like to see it pulled back 2-3 feet to even where you have the overhang. For the roof, it still reads as separate. So for me, I personally think if we could do that, I think that's better. I think that might come in and, there'll be some things that will need to change kind of along that, but I think that will help kind of solve that issue.
I agree. I think if it can be reworked so that the overhang of the gable end indeed pulls back as well, rather than aligns or projects from the two existing facades, it will lend itself to feeling more removed from that realm of creating a mass that's just out of sorts with the district. So I would agree with that as a condition.
So as a commission, do we feel that a condition on this for that setback and then to create kind of maybe state what we feel that setback should be would be sufficient to work with staff?
I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay.
Anybody else have any objections or comments about that?
Would a commissioner like to make a motion then?
Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC, 21-404, for the property located at 1505 Bayshore Boulevard in the Hyde Park Historic District, with the following conditions: that the gable end element of the screened porch addition that faces the adjoining property be reconsidered and removed from the full line of the existing facades of both the primary structure and the accessory structure, so that there is retained a sense of detachment between the primary and secondary structures. Because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: for its height and width, for its orientation its alignment, rhythm, well, maintaining materials within the districts, its trim and detail, and its roof forms, and for maintaining quality within the district.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
And then with the applicant, I just come on record, come up to the microphone and just, do you understand the condition that was added and do you agree to it?
Yes and yes. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Moving to the next case reflected on the agenda, which is ARC 21-443. This is for the address of 832 South Boulevard. This is in the Hyde Park Historic District. This is a contributing structure that dates back to 1916. The underlying zoning attached to this parcel is RS 60. The request is new construction in addition to the primary structure and a rear porch, approximately 540 square feet. In 2018, there was some action taken at this address. It was associated with the accessory structure. There was a contributing accessory structure that was approved for removal, and then a new accessory structure in its place. If you look at the overhead that I have indicated by the Sanborn map, area in question is highlighted in the green parcel. This does face South Boulevard. There is a substantial alley that runs to the rear of the property. This is just one block off of Bayshore Boulevard. And to the north, you have Inman. If you look at the outline of the primary structure in 1929, it shows the vernacular of the primary structure with a very generous porch that wraps around to the south, which is currently still there. In 1929, they had two accessory structures on site. This is looking from above. Just wanted to point out in this illustration from above, you see the pool is on the south side of the property. It's no longer there as part of the modification to the accessory structure, or not really a modification, but the new accessory structure. Part of that was the pool orientation was relocated to the rear of the property, and the photos will show that. This is looking at the front facade, very generous porch. Notice the columns here. They're going to pick up some of the details and the porch in the rear, and a portion of the front porch that wraps around has been screened in a sensitive manner that meets our criteria. High-end craftsman style home with a dormer to come break up the roof line on the cross gable from the front elevation. Looking down the vehicular access, you have the ribbon drives that are period appropriate, little walkway onto the porch. You see the massing of the side of the house and the shake shingles broken up by the belt course on the 2 stories. The new accessory structure in the rear. This is looking down the drive aisle at that area. This currently houses the mechanicals that they sensitively enclosed. And this is looking at the abutting house to the north. This is their driveway, so this is the immediate neighbor to the north. This is looking at the south elevation. You see the multiple gables on that south elevation to kind of break up that larger facade. The dormer in the front, the fireplace piercing through the roof, and then a portion of the porch that was enclosed. This is looking at that screened-in porch enclosure from the rear. As the aerial showed, this was the location of the pool that has been relocated. This is that south elevation. You see the sawtooth in here as far as the siding goes, some of the dental molding details, the large overhangs, and the brackets. This is looking at the rear elevation, kind of close up. You see the dormer here, the accessory structure. This is looking at that same elevation from a different vantage point. Talked about the pool that was relocated to the rear, so there is some distance between the back of the house and where the pool is. And this was the new detached accessory structure. And then to conclude, just looking at the rear yard, this is where the accessory structure, when the contributing accessory structure was removed. This is the footprint of the new accessory structure, and the Sanborn showed multiple accessory structures, and this was the other accessory structure that was indicated on the Sanborn. That concludes the photo presentation, and I'll have their designer address the board.
Good evening. My name is Yves Radimus Kulke. I am the designer and also friend of John and Whitney Henry, who are the owners and reside at 832 South Boulevard. I'm going to switch over here so I can start showing you guys the presentation. Hello, can you hear me? As Ron mentioned, John and Whitney, after buying the house, I believe in 2014, they immediately began to, address some of the accessory structures that needed some taking care of, and they moved that guitar-shaped pool back into the rear. And so here's the existing site plan, and I'm just going to kind of address that. We have the back face of the structure in its relationship to the existing structures, and really the only place that we can add to the house is here. And I will say that John and Whitney really want to kind of add this portion to make the existing kitchen functional. Right now, we're not really sure exactly what happened in the history of the house, but the way the kitchen is laid out is kind of haphazard. It doesn't function well on a day-to-day basis. And they are, since they've moved to Tampa, 6 years, their kids have began to grow up and have friends, and also they've, kind of are part of the community as well, and like to host and have family and friends over. So part of this is to try to, enhance that kind of their way of life and host people. So enlarging the kitchen here on this side and making it functional is really the goal of this project. And also they want to expand one of the bedrooms into a master suite so that the children can have the second story to themselves. And I'll just shift this over and as Ron mentioned, this house is beautiful. It's craftsman or the craft that was taken to build the house is pretty superior. And anyway, there's this siding that's very unique. You don't see it very often, and that's really brings the beauty of the house out. But as we move around the back of the house, I think the door and the window here we believe weren't original, and they kind of how can I put it? This door doesn't really access anything anymore. We think it was put there to access the pool that was removed. These windows, they look like they were enlarged, and the corner detail here doesn't really happen anywhere else around the house. And as we move across this face, we're going to be removing. And I'll just say that the only real original, what seems to be original, are the windows on this facade. Are these 3 windows here next to the bedroom. As we move around, everything else on this side is pretty original. So we'll just start presenting here the proposed site plan. What we want to do is add into the back about 10 to 3 feet, 10 foot 3 to the back, and also out into the side yard, but stay shy and respect the existing porch wall line, and also add this small porch in the back so that they can have a view to the pool. Here are some three-dimensional renderings of what it will look like, and I'll just kind of skip over these and go into the elevations. I would like to just go through. I know it's not part of it. I would like to go through the plan, just on the perimeter of the house as it relates to the plan. We are proposing to remove 2 existing windows on this side so that we can shift them and arrange them appropriately to fit the bedroom and the layout of the new bedroom. We will remove all these openings here, but replace windows that are complementary and to the style of the house. Here we have the entry, and I will show the front of the house. We're proposing to do a French door like this, nothing anywhere close to what the main entry door to the house is. And there's another door on the side here that you can't see because it's enclosed by the closed off porch, but we're proposing a French door similar to that here. And then as you come around in the porch, these windows and this third window here, again, I'll bring this facade or the front facade. We have this, it's a 5 foot by 4 foot 6 window, which doesn't happen really anywhere else. All the other windows, as you go around the perimeter of the house, are 3 foot by 5 foot. And so we're proposing that so that there's views and to the pool, and also natural light certainly coming through here, and diffused light coming in from the porch into this breakfast or gathering space. I did want to say that there is a little mud room here so that as they come in during the rain, the kids can drop off their soccer equipment, their backpacks, shoes, things like that. But this kitchen will really be more of an informal gathering space for friends and family. As you come back on this side, that's kind of a utility wall, with refrigerator and range. And as you get to this corner, there's 2 windows that we're adding where the kitchen sink is. And just to finish off here, we're removing this existing door, which we don't think was original. There may have been a window there, but we don't think that was really an original component of the house. But we're closing this off for a pantry that allows as a staging area for their formal dining room, which is about right here, or it is right here. And that allows them to cook and stage and have formal events or large Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners, things like that. So let's see if I can pull this out. Sorry. There you go. Here's the existing and the proposed elevation. Again, since we ended at the pantry, we'll start there again. Here's the existing door that we'll be removing, and this comes out towards the side house, or the side yard, into the side yard, and we have the kitchen window and also that other kind of front porch proportioned window on this side. And as we turn, well, I will say this, we do have these columns that Ron mentioned. we're introducing these columns. They are smaller and subordinate to the original, but in keeping with the style of the house. The roof, I believe, was replaced. The whole roof was replaced a couple years ago, and so I think we're just I think it's an asphalt shingle roof that will replace, or not replace, but will match. Sorry. Ooh, that's better. Let's see. As we turn to the rear elevation, this will all be removed to make room for the expansion. And again, here we have the columns that we're introducing, subordinate to the front, but in keeping with the style of the house. Much like the front, and I'll show you a picture towards the end of the front porch and the architrave and the dentile frieze dentile. We can argue about what we can call it, but and we have these prominent knee braces that we'll be also introducing in like to the existing. The roofs do have these eased edges, which we'll introduce on the new gable end here. Let's see. There's a shingle-faced guardrail that from the front, and I showed it in the existing. Bring this image out again so you guys can see it. But we're gonna base it in like have the same detailing where it's a shingle guard rail with a wood top that stops just underneath the base of the column. And I haven't mentioned, but we're not going to copy the same shingle pattern, so that's going to be the delineating piece that shows the difference between the historic and the new, and I will kind of address that in the next elevation. As we move across the elevation, here's the French doors into the mudroom, and then the two replaced windows that are in keeping with the style. We'll talk about the windows and door detailing when we get to the details. So this elevation, this is kind of to me the most important one. We're removing these two windows and replacing them here, and along the line that kind of starts the new and finishes the old. We're going to propose to put a 6-inch wood band so that we can stop the old shingle pattern and start the new shingle pattern. But also, to do this addition, we need to also address the ceiling height on the interior. And to really get that to happen, we need to break the roof right at this point. And I have this elevation, and I don't know if you can see it. I kind of marked where the breaking point will be. It'll be just underneath and at where this odd-shaped window ends. We're proposing that, to get that elevation height on the interior, we have to break it about right here, it'll create an odd vertex. So we're going to propose to put one of the knee braces there, and put a new one at the very end, in liking with the rest of the house. Moving on to sections. Apologize, these got mixed up. This is a section through the porch. Again, here's a shot of, and I'll try to zoom it in a little bit for you guys there. This is we measured the existing column. These are the measurements of the existing column. This one's going to be smaller, subordinate, but also in keeping with the style of the house. Back to the section. Again, you know, essentially the porch, we're taking a lot of notes from the existing porch, and we're you know, facing all the surfaces on the inside and outside, of course, as with the new shingle pattern. But also we're taking the same wood guard, the top of the guardrail trim, and again stopping at the base of the column. But you know, this column is really showing that it's not what's subordinate to the new or to the existing. We're also introducing knee braces and also beadboard under the eave, like the existing. And then this is just a little bit more zoomed in detail. You know, because we shrunk the size of the column, our depth, our architrave depth, or the beam coming across will be shallower. But again, I'll show you the detail at the end. But you know, we're gonna recess it with beadboard, and also clad it with wood and paint it white to match the existing. The underside of the interior of the porch will also be beadboard. How long do I have? Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. Oh, I'll try to wrap this up here. And then, you know, the doors and windows, we did our best to measure the trim, and there's been, you know, it's been painted many times, but you know, we're trying to, you know, address that and not make it exactly the same, but we'll find a molding that is similar in dimensions. I think that's really it for the windows and doors. So the finishes, and I apologize, I think I wrote it in here that, you know, the pictures, the images and the color didn't really come out, but you know, if you go to the site, they're both the same in terms of color. We're gonna do the same, but the pattern is gonna be different. We're gonna match what the accessory structures have, and that'll go around the entire building. Of course, taking notes from these details of columns and beams and knee braces, and underneath the eaves, we're gonna you know, do I don't want to say the same, but in like of the same of those details. The deck will be tongue and groove, much like the existing, and the stairs that go up to the deck are concrete in the front, and will be the same in the rear. And I think that's really it.
Does that conclude your presentation?
It does not. I'm sorry. And when we sorry. When I have two more little photographs to show you. I think our hardware in our lighting, we only really have one door, and there aren't really any other. There isn't any other lighting really around the house other than the chandelier in the front, in which we're not going to try to you know, replicate or anything like that. So, you know, we're proposing a craftsman style lighting at the door, much like, you know, there's braces and you know, simple hardware for the one door that we're adding. All the other, you know, the window hardware will be from the inside. There's nothing really on the exterior to address. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. All right, at this point, staff will present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Avila, staff with Historic Preservation. The request in front of you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction in addition to the primary structure. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines. Under conditions, there was the second bullet item that I wanted the applicant to revisit the window proportions that were presented on the south and east elevation. Through the presentation tonight, he alluded to there is a proportion that is consistent with what he's presenting on the front porch. So it looks like any regular shaped window, but the structure does have the proportions of the window that he has. So that satisfies staff's concern. I showed in my photo presentation the location of the mechanicals currently where they're at now. He is proposing an addition in that section of the parcel. So if he could show on the site plan where the mechanicals are going to go.
Yes.
And I believe that completes my portion of the public hearing, and I will be here to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, we will open the public hearing to anyone that would like to speak for or against the project. Seeing and hearing none. All right, we'll move on to now the commissioners being able to ask questions. I guess we can start off. It looks like you have the site plan up for the mechanical piece, so maybe could you just present that first?
Yes. Yeah, so there is a mechanical yard right here. There's a small bump out on the side of the building, and just after that, there's a mechanical yard where there's AC units there. We're proposing to put it there, and likely we're going to have to replace some of those units anyway, and I think that's an opportunity to size up the units that are there to accommodate the additional square feet that we're adding.
And do you propose to screen those air handler units with a fence or?
Oh, absolutely. So, if I could, sorry, I was trying to get my. So right now, you can see there's a fence around it. If we need to extend a little bit out, a couple of feet to fit it, I don't imagine that we did those two units are quite large already, but we'll use the same thing that's there. They will be fenced off if that's the question. Yes.
All right, thank you. Would a commissioner like to begin with any questions?
I would like to address your large format punched windows, which you have around, I guess, your kitchen eating area.
Yes.
If you could pull up those elevations, if you would please, sir.
I will. If I can get both of them in here.
Now, for both the east and your, I guess it's your south elevation, you
Yeah.
have those large format punched windows. And I understand how you're generating those from, but it still seems a bit odd in their proportion. And the question I have for you is, had you considered other arrangements of windows in here? As an example, instead of one large punch, have two of a more proportional pair of windows ganged together in each of these particular locations, or a whole row of windows because of your intention to bring in natural light to this part of the house.
Yes, we did. Actually, we originally had windows that are similar to the dormer up here, with they have stiles in between, and they actually push out. But because the porch area isn't that large, pushing out a window would make the porch a little less useful. And so we went with a single hung window, and that kind of started to begged the question, okay, well, what size window is this? And so we looked at the porch and used that, sort of that proportion. Well, it's not really the same proportion, but we made it more square as opposed to more rectilinear.
Thank you very much.
In a similar vein, were there other considerations for the rear porch's detailing? Typically, historically, you would see the rear and side porches be more diminutive to the primary. And so the feel of the columns and their bases seem a little off in terms of, and even as you're moving through the back, it feels like you want to be lighter and it still has a heavy presence. So was there consideration for other alternatives to the massing in the column and the base that supports them?
I don't want to say no, but I think really what the issue was is the roof, and again back to the breaking that roof. How do we extend more into the backyard with this porch area with a different roof form? And so this kind of was what led us to it. So we tried this gable. It looked a lot better in terms of the different options of roofs, and it worked better. So that's how we got. So my
question isn't about your roof form.
I know. I understand it. So
okay.
When we came to this, we looked at the front porch and it kind of spoke to us to say, okay, we should kind of make it in like of that, and we originally did have the same columns, but in speaking with Ron, we think it was a good suggestion to make them a little bit more thinner or subordinate to that, but we kind of let the architecture tell us what we should do, and if that if we should have had different options, I'd certainly take suggestions on what might that be.
Okay. I have no other questions at this time.
Did I miss a image from the front?
No. Oh, you mean in terms of the renderings or the
Yeah.
elevations? Since we weren't doing anything to the front elevation, we didn't provide
Okay.
one, but we have a.
The reason I'm asking is it looks like that addition actually comes out further
The what?
than the original house.
Say it again?
It looks like the addition will stick out a little further from the front elevation than the original house, the line.
You're talking about the side?
Correct.
It doesn't. It stays within that line.
Okay, just going from the site plan. So you're telling me that it is behind that
It's
front
not.
door?
It's not proud. It's not on the line. It's behind it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see, let me see which elevation it is. On the rear, you're looking at the north elevation where you're tying into the roof line, into that gable with a little shed type roof. What is the pitch of that on the addition? Where you're tying in up underneath that window?
Here,
Yes.
it's like 1 and 2.
So what is your roof material there?
So we're gonna do a asphalt shingle roof, but we'll likely have to double layer the waterproofing to get that to work.
You mentioned that you're going to move existing windows, but the note that you have is kind of confusing. You're actually going to use new windows in the whole, in the new construction, is that correct?
Correct, yes. And they will be, wood,
So the exterior is wood as well, they're not clad or?
clad.
Clad with sometimes they make them aluminum clad, stuff like that?
Oh, no. We're
It's
proposing wood windows, not vinyl or anything no.
Okay.
Just to mention, John and Whitney, they really want the house to have the same construction quality too, so.
All right.
The proposed doors would also?
Yes, solid core doors, yes.
Is it feasible to reuse any of the existing windows?
Sure, we could, but from a energy efficiency standpoint, maybe not. There's the house is already is pretty old, and the windows bleed a lot of cool air out during the summer. So I think if we could use a newer but wood window, that would help in keeping the house cooler.
If we have the proposed north elevation up right now, I'm not sure if it's just the modeling of this or photos are a little bit off or something. So the way that the existing roof line right now is running up onto the second floor on the rear side. So we have those windows. I'm assuming the roof truly doesn't cut that corner of the window off, correct?
It
does?
It does.
He's talking about.
Doesn't.
You're talking
Okay.
You're talking about this.
Yep. So as you pull that new roof up, will you have to do anything similar to that to the windows that's kind of closer to the corner, or are those going to be able to stay the same dimensions when you look at the flashing and everything as it comes up that roof or that wall?
Well, that is actually a flashing piece. The bottom of the window you can't see really because that piece is painted. We're proposing to take a point there and come out and flash it similarly. Yeah, I mean.
Okay. Could we look at the south elevations?
Yes.
Understanding as you walk through the floor plans, the new addition for the south side really focuses on the kitchen and making sure that that's a functional and usable kitchen. Was there any consideration given to where it did include more windows, as was mentioned by staff, or proportions of windows to where it did not seem as a kind of a large wall or space where it's just blank?
There were many iterations, yes. And I'm trying to think of what pushed us towards this, and it was really trying to arrange the kitchen, the mudroom, and the pantry in a way that was functional. We didn't. I mean, we had windows there. We had windows in different configurations of the kitchen, but where we landed was a function of the window, not the windows, but the plan and the rest of the rest of the addition that led us to this point. But I think. I don't know that we can add any windows there now. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't believe you presented, and if you did, I apologize. Do you have an elevation of the west side of this new one-story addition? So obviously you wouldn't see it from the street, but there is that wall facade. And what will that be? What will that look like?
Yeah, I apologize. We don't have it. And it's, you know, I don't know, I'll show you the plan, but, find it. You know, it will be similar, and I know I don't want to see this, but it'll be similar to the elevation here with the same size window centered.
Okay. So would the plan be, like, if we're looking at the south elevation, so there would be a window sort of centered within that wall. Would you take that white trim piece that separates sort of the first floor and second floor and continue that over, or would you not?
No.
So how would you separate or delineate kind of that inside corner?
That's a good question. I think we were planning to dye the two shingle patterns together, but we can certainly add another wood piece similar to the other side where it begins, and have a finishing point for the historic shingle pattern and the new.
Okay. In terms of the shingle pattern, would you mind bringing up that image that you had of kind of the two of them?
Yeah.
And this may be a dumb question. Is the only difference between the two is sort of the height kind of between the shingles, or what is the difference?
No.
They look the exact same.
Yeah, they're a little they're tapered a little bit, and also first they're milled, and you can see the sort of the pattern of the blade.
Okay.
Two, the proportions are different. These are more square as opposed to rectilinear. And I don't believe they're keystone or anything like that. I think they're straight.
Okay. So what would you do? Would you use the proposed shingles or the historic shingle pattern for the door infill, where the door will be removed?
Oh, okay. Yes. No. I know. Well, I know. Yeah. No. For anything that, like the window or the door, we would take whatever we would, certainly salvage what we're taking from the rear facade that we're removing, and replace it for those openings that we're closing off.
Okay.
Yeah.
The foundation and its enclosure for the new piece, and the section I saw that's a concrete wall. What will the exterior of that be, and how does that kind of compare to the existing house?
The foundation?
Yes, sir.
The brick piers.
So the existing house, what is the foundation?
The existing house is, you can see here, these brick piers, and there's infill brick between.
Okay.
We're probably going to have this concrete stem wall that we're going to put brick veneer on.
Okay. So I guess the intention would be to have that brick veneer for that, and then paint it similar to.
That is correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
Was there consideration given to using the same, I'm sorry, my brain, siding as what's on the existing structure?
Was there a consideration to use the original siding?
A same pattern. What you're using is so close to existing, but it's just not quite the same.
Yeah, and I think that's that's our intent you'll be able to tell the difference between the historic and the new, but also without making it so different that it's it sticks out like a sore thumb. So that's kind of the intent, yeah.
It almost looks like we just couldn't match it, so we tried to get close, but maybe that's just a point of discussion.
Well, we weren't, I guess I don't understand.
Are they the same thickness of material?
They're wood, yeah, wood.
But what there's existing, is it, I'm not knowing the thicknesses, I'm just, in my mind, I'm trying to visualize as a builder how you're gonna tie this together and make it work.
There is a band board that you're putting in between, correct? The vertical band board that you are placing
Yes,
between the
correct.
existing and the new siding.
Yeah.
Even on this one elevation that he was asking about?
Yes, he
Okay.
said that they were amenable to doing something similar in that return wall.
You know, with respect to the
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
with respect to the shingles, it almost appears that the real big differentiation between the new and the old, so the new one is a manufactured product. It's very uniform in its size, its face, its width. The existing almost looks like it's hand split.
That is correct. Yeah, I think it's hand.
So you have slight variations between each and every piece, and then the maker of this wall kind of eyeballs it on an even basis. And that's where we get all these heavy shadow lines, which we don't have with the new product.
Any additional questions either for the applicant or staff?
Yes, you made I just want to clarify, the new trim, the trim on the new windows and doors will match the existing
In
trim?
color and material, that we would,
And profiles, sizes?
yes, yeah, they'll be the same size.
I have one additional question, just kind of a big picture item. For the overall massing of the addition, did you look at anything that kind of sat fully behind the larger mass of the house to where it did not protrude on the south?
Yes, it was just a smaller addition, and you know, the kitchen we wouldn't have had, you know, much more kitchen. Yeah, I mean, I think this is ample for gathering space. I think that's kind of the goal.
Okay. All right.
I have one last quick question, and that has to do with the crawl space underneath. In the photo that you have up, they have left some of the bricks out so that there is some attempt at ventilation under there. Now, you're going to have a slab on grade for the addition? Is that how that's going to work?
No.
No, okay, so it's going to be...
No, it's going to be a raised floor.
Okay.
Just like it is.
And it's going to have a continuous concrete stem wall?
Well, I mean, I think we'll break it up in where we need to have proper ventilation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, the same for the area under the back porch, because you've shown a concrete stem wall there all the way around it, no ventilation.
There will be. I mean, yeah, we're not showing the ventilation, but we'll
Okay.
We'll provide ventilation.
Thank you.
I have one more question. The window in the kitchen that we're looking at sort of underneath the photograph,
Yes.
is there space to give it a little bit of breathing room between that corner?
I think there is. I just want to put my eyes on the plan before I say yeah. Yeah, there's space to draw it to.
The one that's closer to the sink, kitchen sink.
This one.
Yes, that one.
Oh, I mean, the answer is yes. We're going to have a smaller upper cabinet, but the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
No, sir.
What do you
Okay.
propose for the vent covers in the stem wall?
I'm sorry?
What do you propose for the vent covers for the stem wall in the addition?
That's a good question. I think what they have right now is a gap, and you know, I'm sorry. Mr. Myers, I don't know all your names, I'm so sorry. He mentioned that these are broken up for venting. There are places where there's gaps and there's an access to it. I think what's happening really here is that it's kind of falling apart. That's what's really happening. So we'll provide the same a gap with an access point, and what they have now is like a lattice, 45-degree lattice. Cover it.
All right. At this point, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
I don't need a rebuttal.
Okay. We'll close this portion of the public hearing, and the commissioners can now discuss the case. Would a commissioner like to begin?
I would like to address my fellow commissioner's comment on the diminutive nature of the rear porch. I understand exactly the idea of where that comment is coming from. There's so much detailing in terms of its mass that relates to the front porch, which of course is the major porch of the entire building. Why replicate it all, even if it's somewhat smaller than the front for the rear? And I think maybe, I think that comment is right on point, and there's an aesthetic challenge between this building with its major front porch and minor rear porch. And I think the rear porch needs to become a little bit more minor. I understand how the designer had knocked down the scale of the columns. I think the detailing is fine, but I think the scale needs to come down even further. Instead of being 2/3 the size in the front, it should be more like a half of the size. Make it much, much smaller than the existing, but still with the same, complement of detailing. But the other part of the comment, which I think was really spot on, was the nature of the low wall for the porch, matching what's happening in front. I think we missed an opportunity here where instead of having a low solid wall, we can do a heavy top rail and picket for the enclosure of the porch in the rear, much in the same vein as you have a heavy rail and picket for the stairs to the accessory structure, and tie everything in the backyard in that fashion as well too, because the element does exist somewhere on the site. I think, the combination of reducing the scale and adding a lacy effect to that wall can contribute strongly to a more diminutive nature of that rear porch, as opposed to having a fight with a scale issue, a material issue, with the main front porch.
And I do think the size of the roof, which was one of the reasonings for being, it's really quite a small roof when you look at it head on in the gable end from the rear. It's not a massive roof. So I do think the columns are a little bit oversized still. In terms of opening up the balustrade or the knee wall for that porch area, it just seems to make more sense from an aspect of if the porch is all about, and you're making these moves with the larger proportioned windows, barring that idea of letting more light in. Therefore, why not let the porch be as airy as possible? Because what that does is it lends itself to a very massive move, and it feels heavy. And typically, as you move back from the more public realm to the private realms of a residential property in these neighborhoods, you see that breakdown of those sorts of visual barriers, so that you can embrace your private environs more quickly, more readily. And there's a certain experience that the owner then gets that others can't without accessing the property, right? Additionally, just as a parent with a pool, and knowing how quickly one can lose sight of someone in the pool, anything you can do to reduce those barriers really would be something to talk about just with your client about. But from an aesthetic and historical perspective, the lighter it is, the more appropriate it seems for the scale and for its placement on the site and its purpose.
I concur completely.
Yeah, to me, this is the only real sore thumb for the whole of the proposal. Because I understand where all the bits and pieces are coming from. I can understand how the roof forms are melding into the existing roof. I can understand how you don't see this from the front street line, or even obliquely from the front street line. This is well shielded to the rear of the house. Overall, I think it's a relatively successful intervention.
And I just want to remark on the siding discussion. To a trained eye, you're definitely going to notice it. Maybe the person just taking the dog for a walk, strolling with the baby buddy, whatever, they may not, but you certainly will. And I celebrate the fact that people come to us and say, I'm not going to match that exactly, because there's two sides to that coin of being able to tell an existing from a new condition on a property. And we often see people tread that line very lightly and then others very heavily. And I think by adding those vertical bands, it certainly helps with that, that differentiation. But the
siding on one
understand
side
as well.
You did it on one side. I think it needs to be repeated on the other side in the corner in some form.
Yep.
I have no further comment.
The shingles would drive me crazy.
I'm going to send you some projects.
The shingles would drive me crazy.
So I completely agree with the kind of the idea of lightening the mass up from the rear in terms of the porch. So getting rid of that knee wall, I think, will help. Personally, I have a fundamental issue with the overall massing, kind of the location of the addition. In my mind, I think you kind of hit on it where you said, you can kind of go from one end to where it does blend in and looks like it was part of it, or you can go to this kind of extreme and it looks like it's, clearly new. To me, it just looks completely attached and added. And if the porch was still kind of open, which it's not on that side, then I think it would be even more extreme. And chances are that porch was not closed when it was created. So in my opinion, I do have an issue with that, but I could understand where it could look, appropriate from one perspective.
And I'll piggyback that comment. I would personally think I would like it better if it was pulled back, so the massing wasn't as large. But I also understand from a function standpoint, from the interior, why the mass is there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think this is an excellent example of a presentation where, becoming familiar with what's happening on the interior of the building explains what we're looking at from the exterior point in terms of its massing, fenestration, and all the rest of that sort of stuff.
So typically, I'm one of those proponents of the wraparound corner of porch and doing everything you can to make sure that it always reads. But I feel like with the addition being as far removed as it is, it's definitely within that realm where it feels like it's far enough away. And as long as it is no further than the line of that outside on that elevation, it seems to be working. What's not benefiting us in this presentation today is the massing studies. Anything that shows that relationship really from a three-dimensional perspective that lets us understand how you read that.
we do very frequently complain about massive sidewalls, and now we're complaining about a sidewall that is broken up. But I also would remind you that very frequently we're complaining about sidewalls because there is only 7 feet between the residence and the property line. Here we have a really nice wide side yard. I'm assuming, I don't know what the depth of it is, but it used to have a pool in it, so it has to be substantial. And so that the addition seems to sit pretty easily in that site.
Mhm. Agreed. It doesn't, it does not feel crammed in there
Mhm.
like we sometimes see. You know, like you say, you know, it's not exactly 7 feet on a property line against a fence or another building or something else. There's some breathing room all the way around this.
Are there any other discussions commissioners would like to bring up? Or is a commissioner ready to make a motion?
Wait, I want to ask one question before we, are we all okay with the windows discussion on the south elevation? Does anybody?
I have no issue with the windows.
Okay. All right, move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-433 for the property located at 832 South Boulevard for the with the following conditions: that that the rear porch proportions of the columns and the balustrade system be reviewed with staff and reconsidered in terms of its mass and scale. And and that's the only condition. Because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons. That it's consistent with the height, the orientation and site coverage, the maintaining materials within the district's trim and detail, facade proportions, entrances and porch projections, roof forms, and the maintenance of quality within the district.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And then as either the agent, do you understand the condition that was added and then approve?
I do.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
So I think by